Hey guys, I'm here to help you kids who are virtual today work through these first couple of documents on this DBQ that you're working with today. Okay, if you look at the template that was sent out, there's four things that I'm looking for when I'm kind of assessing how you do on this DBQ. So first off, you should make two annotations per document. And that DBQ does allow you to highlight sections and allows you to add in comments with the read write app. So you'll do that two times per document, two annotations. And then I'm looking at your translations. I want you to put the documents, each of the documents that you're working with today, you're going to put in your own words. Okay. It should generally match the length of the document as well. It's not like a summary where you're just summarizing the basic themes and ideas. You're trying to put line by line in your own words that you think, okay, this is a good translation. This is what he's saying here, okay? Or this is what the author's saying, right? The third thing you're doing is actually answering the questions that go with the documents, trying to pull out specific key quotes and answering those questions. And then the last thing this week is the actual essay prompt. And that's all we're doing this week is just working with this whole DBQ. This is the one DBQ all year that we'll spend a whole week on because I want you to kind of know the steps that you should go through when you're going through this DBQ. So whenever we do the next one, we won't need to be this thorough, but you'll know generally what I expect, okay? So clicking over here into the actual DBQ itself, it didn't scan super well, so the word looked slanted, but you can still use that play app up here on the read write app, and it can read it to you. So just to make sure it works.
Part in. Document-based question. This question is based on the accompanying.
Okay, yeah. So it does identify the text, and it can be read to you. Okay. This first page is really kind of an overview of the whole DBQ itself, and these two bullet points in this box here is what you're actually going to be writing your essay prompt over. It's not specifically important for us today, but it is important for me really quickly to read through these first two chunks with you on this first page just to kind of get an idea, okay? So it says this question is based on the accompanying documents. All these 8 documents you're going to read, they're all going to be at the same. They're all going to have a general theme. They're all going to be they're comparative documents, right? It is designed to test your ability to work with historical documents. Some of these documents have been edited for the purposes of this question. As you analyze the documents, take into account the source of each document and any point of view that may be presented in the document. Historical context. Throughout history, different systems of government, decision-making, and different roles of citizens in the decision-making process have developed. 2 of these systems are absolute control and democratic control. So, guys, just like we talked about in the Nearpod notes this last week, where you're comparing those 2 major kind of governments, the democratic kind where the people have the power, and then the authoritarian kind where the people do not have any power and the authority is left in the hands of the government. Those are the kinds of governments that are going to be compared in these documents, okay? So it says the word absolute control. It's referencing authoritarian governments there, okay? So let's skip the rest part because we'll get to that part later. But part A, which is this whole document, document 1, okay? So it says analyze the document and answer the short questions that follow each document in the space provided. We're not going to answer the questions today, but we are going to focus on annotating and putting these documents into our own words over here into our Google Doc, okay? So also on the assignment on Google Classroom, you'll see here that you have a space here for putting document 1 in your own words. And you have a space over to the right where you can actually answer the questions that go with Doc 1. But right now, today, let's just focus on documents 1, 2, 3, and 4 and just put them in our own words and then adding our annotations in, okay? All right, so document 1. This is from a kind of clip of a book called The History of Thucydides. So this is about ancient Greece, okay? It references Athens in 5th century BC. They're the first one. They're kind of the first modern society, I guess. I don't know if you consider 5th century BC modern, but they were the first like society that chose to have democratic values, democratic principles, and they were a direct democracy in Athens for a period of time. And they're kind of like the founders of democracy in the sense that they were the first society to really try this democratic experiment of having the people have the power. Okay, so the source here, History of Thucydides, Book 2, and this is uh, spoken by a guy named Pericles, who was an Athenian politician. He was a kind of a prominent politician in Athens, and really believed in democratic principles really well. Okay, and it's called Funeral Oration. I'm not sure. I've read it. I don't know what it really has to do with a funeral, but in this document, he's going to be talking about democracies and what are the key characteristics of the Athenian democracy, and it'll apply kind of largely to democracies as a whole. Okay, so he starts off by saying, "Our form of government does not enter into rivalry with the institution of others." Okay, so he's the institutions of others. He's talking about the other Greek city states. If you ever studied ancient Greece, not all the city states have democratic governments. Like Sparta had a king. A bunch of the city states had like kings and queens, and they were still like monarchies in a sense, that they didn't really value people having power. They didn't value democracy. Okay, so he's like, our government doesn't rival the other ones. We do not copy our neighbors. They don't want to be a monarchy, but we are an example to them. So he's saying we are the shining example in all of Greece on how government should be, right? It is true that we are called a democracy, for the administration is in the hands of the many and not the few. Okay, so he's describing a key characteristic there, that in democracies, administration, power, decision making is in the hands of the many, meaning everyone, the hands of everyone, not just a few, right? But while the law secures equal justice to all alike in their private disputes, the claim of excellence is also recognized. Okay, so this next little middle sentence here, he's another key characteristic pops out. Right, the law guarantees equal justice to everyone. Right, so if there's a dispute between individuals, the law is there to guarantee equality. Everyone should be treated the same, no matter what the crime. Right. And he goes on to say the claim of excellence is also recognized. So, and you'll understand what that means when I read this next little chunk. Okay. And when a citizen is in any way distinguished, he is preferred to the public service, not as a matter of privilege, but as a reward of merit. Okay. So the claim of excellence is this next little sentence. And when a citizen is in any way distinguished. So when a citizen stands out, when he embodies good moral thinking, when he values democratic values, when he wants to help people, then that person is preferred to the public service. That person should be serving in government, right? So preferred to the public service means public service is like you are a person who serves in government, right? We call our politicians our public servants because they're the ones who serve us. They want to represent us in government, right? And they say that's not, it's not really a matter of privilege, but it's as a reward of merit. So if you are a person who really embodies strong moral thinking, good moral values, democratic values, you should be rewarded by being someone who represents the people in government, right? That's what he's saying there. Neither is poverty a bar, but a man may benefit his country whatever the obscurity of his condition. Another key characteristic here, okay, that next sentence. Neither is poverty a bar. Okay, I'm highlighting things here. So no matter how wealthy you are, rich, poor, that should not stop you from being able to serve in government. That should not stop you from being able to benefit your country. Okay, so rich or poor, you should have a say in what your government looks like. There is no exclusiveness in our public life and in our private intercourse, our private communication. We are not suspicious of one another, nor are we angry with our neighbors if he does what he likes. Okay, so again, emphasizing in those sentences there, individual freedoms. Like we want people to live however they want to live, and we're not going to be judgmental, because that's what we value in our society. We value individual liberty. We don't want to be like this group of exclusive individuals who the rich only mingle with the rich and the poor with the poor. No, we want to intermingle. We want to be a society that all values the same things and doesn't matter what kind of socioeconomic status you have. Okay. We do not put on sour looks at him, which, though harmless, are not pleasant. So he's talking about their neighbors. If you don't like your neighbor, we don't judge that neighbor. We don't put sour looks on him. We don't appear to be too judgy. We want people to live the way they want to live. While we are thus unconstrained in our private intercourse, so referencing that uh, the how we're not exclusive and how we value individual liberties, we also have a spirit of reverence or respect. It pervades our public acts. So we respect each other. We are prevented from doing wrong by respect to those which are ordained for the protection of the injured, as well as those unwritten laws. Okay, I'm going to stop there because this last part might get a little confusing. Okay, we are prevented from doing wrong by respect to those which are ordained for the protection of the injured. Okay, in our country, who's in charge of protecting the injured? Who's in charge of protecting the weak, right? We have policemen, we have firefighters, we have public servants, politicians, we have people who work in hospitals, nurses, doctors, right? So they want to do right. They don't want to do wrong because they respect people who protect the weak, right? That's a key characteristic there in democracies. Okay, we respect those who uphold the law. We respect those who try to keep anything bad from happening to people who can't defend themselves. Okay. And then this last little chunk here, as well as to those unwritten laws which bring upon the transgressor, the violator of them, the reprobation or disapproval of the general sentiment. Okay, so he's saying even in democracies we have these unwritten laws, these societal norms that we follow, that we don't want to hurt each other. We don't want the transgressor or the violator to um, do anything wrong. Like we don't want people to act wrong, and we have this. We generally treat people who do wrong, we disapprove of that behavior, and it becomes this thing what we call a norm. It becomes, hey, that's not how you act. We all value these things. This is how we treat each other, and that's what's big about democratic societies. We know how to treat each other generally. Generally, in democratic societies, you find people who treat each other with respect. You find people who don't take advantage of other people, but they actually seek to help other people. Those are characteristics there that this guy named Pericles, he is saying this is what defines us. This is what defines how we live here in Athens. Okay? So hopefully that helped you on that first one. And again, as I'm talking there, you can pause what I'm saying in this screencast and you can go over to your DBQ and put this whole thing in your own words. Now, when you're writing here in this space, it should generally be the length of this paragraph, right? You're trying to go sentence by sentence and you're putting things in your own words. Okay? That's what you're doing there on that space there in Doc 1. Okay. Doc 2, really quickly. Okay. And this will be the last one I go through with you today because I think Doc 3 is a little bit easier for you to kind of break down by yourself. And if you have questions about it, let me know. Email me. And then Doc 4 is a picture that you're going to try to pull out some key details that you're noticing, right? And you're going to try to find out what the picture is actually trying to tell the reader. Okay. Document 2. Here this document is kind of in contrast to document 1 because this is talking about authoritarian governments. Okay, so whenever you see the word absolutist, you can just plug in the word authoritarian. Okay, in the authoritarian state, sovereignty is embodied in the person of the ruler. Okay, so sovereignty, power, all the power to control what's going on, that is embodied in the person of the ruler. So whoever is ruling, they have full sovereignty. They don't need the people's permission. Okay, they have the power. Okay, absolute kings, or you can call that monarchs, right? Claim to rule by divine right, meaning that they were chosen or they were responsible to God alone. They're not responsible to the people. They're responsible to God alone. They were chosen by God to rule. Okay. And then in parentheses here, it says medieval kings governed by the grace of God, but invariably they acknowledged that they had to respect and obey the laws. Okay. And let me pause there before we go on in this document to kind of tell you that this document here, it's from a book called From Absolutism to Present. So it's kind of comparing um, the old way of having kings, where kings had all the power, and we kind of transitioned, especially in Europe. there was this transition during the medieval period or the Enlightenment period where kings started to lose more and more power and people started to have more and more power. Okay, so it didn't all just happen overnight. It happened over a period of time where kings lost more and more power and the people gained more and more power. Okay, so this document's kind of talking about that transition period and how that looked. Okay, so that's why he put that little chunk there in that paragraphs about kings still in this enlightenment period, they governed by the grace of God. So they still said, yes, I'm chosen by God to rule, but they also acknowledged that they had to respect and obey laws that were put in place there before they came into power. Okay. This last sentence of this first paragraph. Absolute monarchs in the 17th and 18th centuries had to respect the fundamental laws of the land, though they claimed to rule by divine right. Okay, so starting to describe that transition. Yes, they said they were chosen by God, but they had to respect other laws that were there before them. Okay, second paragraph, and this is where we start to see a lot of these characteristics of authoritarian governments. Absolute rulers tried to control competing jurisdictions or powers, institutions, or interest groups in their territories. So when the government had all the power and the ruler had all the power, they were trying to control all of the people who could potentially overthrow them. They were trying to control all the other sources of power, all the other interest groups. They regulated religious sects. That's what it says, second sentence. Okay, they regulated religion. Who could practice what religion? What kind of religions were popular? They controlled that. Okay, they abolished the liberties long held by certain areas, groups, or provinces. So they got rid of individual liberties. They got rid of freedoms people normally would have enjoyed. That's how authoritarian governments work. Third sentence, maybe fourth. Okay. Absolute kings are also secured the cooperation of the one class that historically had posed the greatest threat to monarchy, the nobility. So another characteristic, they tried to control the wealthy. They tried to have the wealthy be on their side because the wealthy posed the greatest threat to them. They had the power to potentially hire their own armies to overthrow kings. So that was a characteristic with authoritarian governments, to get the wealthy, the elite, on their side. Okay. Um, in this last sentence, medieval governments restrained by the church, the feudal nobility, and their own financial limitations had been able to exert none of these controls. So this is kind of mentioning back to that transition where people are getting more power, right? So during the Enlightenment period, where you had these philosophers who were starting to emphasize that people should have power in their government, then kings were restrained by the church. Okay, the church had more power. The feudal nobility, or the people who were wealthy and they didn't really agree with the king, they had more power. They also had financial limitations. They couldn't just spend any money they wanted to, right? So there's all these things that are starting to limit the power of kings in this transitional period called the medieval period in Europe. Okay, so kings had been able to exert none of these controls that they normally enjoyed before the medieval period. Okay, so that's what they're talking about here in document 2. I kind of went through that line by line with you, but again, when you go over to your Google Doc, your translation, whenever you're putting it in your own words, that should match generally the length of document 2. Okay. Document 3, I want you to try to do on your own today. Email me if you have questions, but there's a couple of things I want to point out. Document 3, when it says regal authority, that means the king. Okay, regal means like royal, like the royal authority. Okay, and a little context: in 1689 in England, they published this document called the English Bill of Rights, and that's what started to take away the power away from the king and giving it more to the people. Okay, so it's again talking about this transition period where the king's losing more power, people are gaining more power, and this is talking more about how democracy should look, right? This document here. And then document 4 is a cartoon that might be kind of hard to see, but there's some key details here that I want you to notice. There's a sun behind this king's head, kind of representing his divine authority, his divine right, that he was chosen by God, right? And he's certainly seated higher over the other people who are serving him. That's important to note. So use some of those key details when you're telling me what you think the cartoon is really saying there, okay? Email them if you have questions. Hopefully you can get through these 4 documents today, putting them in your own words, but also I want you to highlight, or especially on this this cartoon here, you can enter in a couple of comments here. I should see at least 2 comments on all of these documents when you're done dealing with them, and a couple of highlighted sections where I say, okay, that's what this comment is referencing in this highlighted section, okay? You can do that with your read-write app. Let me know if you have questions. Good luck, guys.